Elvis Presley was more than just a singer and actor. He was a cultural phenomenon who changed the music world. Teenagers across America tried to emulate his iconic hairstyle. But how did Elvis, famously known as the king of rock and roll, what has made him successful, and why did his life end so tragically young? Let's dive into his story and uncover the answers. Elvis Aaron Presley was born on January 8, 1935, in Tupelo, Mississippi, to Vernon Elvis and Gladys Love Presley. The family lived in a modest shotgun house that Vernon had built in preparation for Elvis's arrival. However, Elvis was supposed to have a twin brother, Jesse Garon Presley, who was stillborn just 30 minutes before him. Vernon had German, Scottish, and English roots, while Gladys came from Scotch, Irish, and French Norman ancestry. They came from a working-class background, and Vernon took on odd jobs to make ends meet. The family often relied on government assistance or the kindness of neighbors to get by. When Elvis was just 3 years old, the family faced a major setback. In May 1938, Vernon was convicted of forging a check from a landowner and part-time employer. He was sentenced to 3 years at the Mississippi State Penitentiary in Parchman, although he was released after 8 months for good behavior. During Vernon's imprisonment, Gladys and young Elvis moved in with relatives to get by. In September 1941, Elvis started first grade at East Tupelo Consolidated School, where his teachers described him as an average student. By the time he was 8, he began attending the Saturday Jamboree, a live amateur music program held at the Tupelo Courthouse and broadcast by Wello Radio. This event drew a crowd of about 150 people, and anyone brave enough could perform. Elvis didn't shy away. He sang songs like Old Shep, showcasing his budding talent. After World War II, they purchased a modest 4-room house on Berry Street in East Tupelo. Around this time, Elvis entered 5th grade, and it became clear he had a gift for performing. One day, his teacher, Mrs. Grimes, asked if anyone wanted to lead the class in prayer. Elvis volunteered, and after finishing the prayer, he broke into song, performing Old Shep. Mrs. Grimes was so impressed that she took him to the principal, Mr. Cole, where Elvis sang the song again, earning admiration from both. From these humble beginnings, Elvis Presley's journey to stardom had begun. Just weeks before the Mississippi-Alabama Fair and Dairy Show in Tupelo, a young Elvis Presley was selected to participate in a youth talent competition. On October 3, 1945, 10-year-old Elvis performed publicly for the first time during Children's Day at the fair. Standing on a chair to reach the microphone, he sang Old Shep in front of a crowd during a talent show broadcast on Wello Radio. He captured the attention of hundreds. For his 11th birthday on January 8, 1946, Gladys gifted Elvis his first guitar, purchased for $7.9 at the Tupelo hardware store. According to the store's owner, F.L. Bobo, Elvis had initially wanted a rifle or a bicycle, but his mother convinced him to settle for the guitar. It was all she could afford. Over the next year, Elvis began learning the basics of guitar playing, taught by 2 of his uncles and the pastor at their church. He later reflected that he watched others play and picked up skills on his own. Not long after, the Presley family sold their home on Berry Street and moved to an alley near the fairgrounds in Tupelo. Elvis started 6th grade at Milam Junior High, where his teacher, Mrs. Camp, once asked him to sing for the class. She remembered how the students fell silent, captivated by his voice. By the next year, Elvis began bringing his guitar to school daily, playing and singing during lunch breaks. However, his love for music earned him some teasing from classmates, who mocked him for playing what they called hillbilly tunes. During this time, Elvis became a devoted fan of the Mississippi Slim Show on Tupelo's Wello radio station. Mississippi Slim, his first musical idol, inspired him deeply. Slim's younger brother, a classmate of Elvis, often brought him along to the station, where Slim taught Elvis more about playing guitar and showed him how to work with chords. At just 12 years old, Elvis had the chance to perform live on the radio twice. However, his first attempt ended in stage fright, leaving him unable to perform. A week later, with Slim's encouragement, Elvis returned and successfully sang on the air. By the time Elvis turned 13 in November 1948, his family had moved to Memphis, Tennessee, about 80 miles from Tupelo. They moved frequently, about 10 times in total. Elvis enrolled at Humes High School in Memphis, where his exposure to music flourished. Surrounded by the city's vibrant musical culture, radio shows, church performances, music stores and nightclubs, his passion only grew. During this period, he even joined a small band with 4 other boys from Lauderdale Courts, further fueling his journey toward becoming a music icon. During this time, Elvis began paying extra attention to his appearance. He let his sideburns grow longer than usual and started wearing bold, colorful outfits that made him stand out. While most of his classmates stuck to jeans, Elvis opted for trousers, often pairing them with a coat, giving him the air of a movie star. Life wasn't easy for the Presley family. Vernon and Gladys bounced from one job to another, and Elvis took on odd jobs to help make ends meet. The family regularly attended the Assembly of God Church, where Elvis continued to sing and play his guitar. He spent time wandering Beale Street, soaking up the sounds of black blues and gospel music that filled the air. At night, he attended gospel performances, both black and white, in downtown Memphis, immersing himself in the rich musical culture around him. In a quirky twist, Elvis once got married at just 13 years old. He was so smitten with Magdalene Morgan, a girl he met at church. He even set September 11 as their wedding date. Decades later, Magdalene was shocked to learn about the stunt. Elvis was also a huge fan of comic books, especially Captain Marvel Jr. His cousin Harold Lloyd later recalled how they often swapped comics. By 1952, however, Elvis's growing obsession with music began to overshadow everything else, including school. His grades slipped from A, B, and to C. When a music teacher told him he couldn't sing, Elvis brought his guitar to class the next day and performed the hit "Keep Them Cold Icy Fingers Off Me" to prove otherwise. Most of Elvis's free time was spent in movie theaters or music stores. At night, he and his parents attended gospel sessions at Ellis Auditorium. These gospel performances, blending spirituality and physicality, became a cornerstone of his future musical style. Still, when performing at parties, Elvis leaned more toward pop hits by Dean Martin, Bing Crosby, or Perry Como. In January 1953, Elvis registered for military service, as required for all healthy young men at the age of 18. A few months before graduating high school, he entered Humes High School's annual minstrel show on April 9, 1953. He performed Teresa Brewer's "Till I Waltz Again with You," marking another step in his journey towards stardom. Elvis surprised everyone when he took the stage with his guitar and delivered a performance that left the audience in awe. Reflecting on that moment, he admitted that he wasn't particularly popular in school and had even failed music class, the only subject he ever flunked. He shared how entering a school talent show changed everything. Before his performance, he noticed the crowd murmuring, as no one even knew he could sing. But once he finished, his popularity skyrocketed. Despite having no formal training and being unable to read music, Elvis relied entirely on his ear to learn and play. During his teenage years, Elvis spent a lot of time in music stores, where he listened to records on jukeboxes and in booths. By the time he was finishing high school, he had memorized the songs of Hank Snow and admired the works of country legends like Roy Acuff, Ernest Tubb, Jimmy Rogers, and Bob Wills. One of his biggest inspirations was gospel singer Jake Hess, whose ballad style heavily influenced Elvis's own approach to singing. He often attended monthly all-night singings in the city. However, in the segregated South, he could only attend on nights set aside for white audiences. He also tuned into local radio stations like WDIA-AM, which played spirituals, blues, and the emerging rhythm and blues genre. African-American musicians like Arthur Crudup and Rufus Thomas left a lasting impression on him, shaping his future sound. Graduating from Hume's High School on June 3, 1953, marked the beginning of Elvis' journey toward his dream of becoming a musician. However, his first job after school was far from glamorous. He worked at M.B. Parker Machinist's garage, earning just $33 a week. In August 1953, Elvis visited Sun Records to record a double-sided demo featuring My Happiness and That's When Your Heartaches Begin. Recording was meant as a gift for his mother. He also hoped to catch the attention of someone in the music industry. While cheaper recording options were available nearby, Elvis chose Sun Records. Marion Keisker, the studio administrator and producer, asked Elvis which artist he sounded like. His response was confident. He sang all kinds of music and didn't sound like anyone else. Marion later described him as shy and a little lost, holding a beat-up guitar that looked like a child's toy. After hearing the recording, Sun Records boss, Sam Phillips, instructed Marion to write down Elvis's name, calling him a good ballad singer worth keeping an eye on. During the session, Elvis asked Marion if she knew of any bands looking for a singer, but her answer wasn't encouraging. In those early months, Elvis knew he wanted to be a singer, but had no clear path forward. He spent time hanging around Memphis recording service studios, hoping for a breakthrough. In January 1954, he recorded another demo, featuring I'll Never Stand in Your Way and It Wouldn't Be the Same Without You, but it didn't lead to any major opportunities. Even a local vocal group, the Songfellows, rejected him after an audition. In April, Elvis decided to switch jobs after his former boss insisted he cut his hair. He landed a gig as a truck driver at Crown Electric, earning a solid $40 a week. Around the same time, his friend Ronnie Smith, a fellow music enthusiast with whom Elvis had played several shows, was already part of a professional band at just 16. The band was led by Eddie Bond, a seasoned Memphis musician who was on the hunt for a vocalist. Ronnie suggested Elvis for the role, but after trying out a couple of songs, Elvis didn't make the cut. Bond turned him down and bluntly told him to stick to truck driving, claiming he'd never make it as a singer. But fate wasn't done with Elvis yet. Around that time, Sam Phillips, the head of Sun Records, was searching for a fresh, groundbreaking sound. Phillips wanted someone who could bring the style of popular black musicians to a broader audience. This led him to invite Elvis to the studio. Initially, Phillips wasn't impressed with Elvis's performance of the ballad, but he encouraged him to sing anything else he knew. After hearing more, Phillips was intrigued and decided to pair Elvis with two local musicians, guitarist Scotty Moore and bassist Bill Black. On the night of July 5, the trio gathered for a recording session, but things weren't going well. Frustrated, Elvis picked up his guitar and launched into Arthur Crudup's 1946 blues tune, That's All Right. Bill Black joined in, fooling around with his bass, and Moore couldn't help but jump in too. Sam Phillips, overhearing the commotion, popped his head out of the control room and asked what they were doing. When they admitted they didn't know, Phillips urged them to start over. This time he hit record. He had found the sound he'd been searching for. Just 3 days later, Memphis DJ Dewey Phillips debuted That's All Right on his popular Red Hot and Blue show. The response was electric. Listeners flooded the station with calls, desperate to know who the singer was. The buzz was so intense that Dewey played the song on repeat for the rest of his show. During a live interview, Dewey asked Elvis which high school he attended, a subtle way of confirming to curious listeners that Elvis was white, as many had assumed he was black. In the days that followed, the trio recorded another track, Bill Monroe's Blue Moon of Kentucky, giving it a unique bluegrass twist with an echo effect Sam Phillips called slapback. The two songs were released as a single, and That's All Right quickly became a hit in Memphis. Eddie Bond, the same man who had rejected Elvis, sent word through Ronnie Smith to see if Elvis might now be interested in joining his band. Elvis, however, politely declined. On July 17, Elvis, Moore, and Black performed live for the first time as a trio at the Bon Air Club, with Elvis still using his first guitar. By the end of the month, they played at Overton Park Shell. That night, Elvis's eccentric dance moves and raw energy marked the beginning of a style that would soon make him a legend. Not long after, Scotty Moore and Bill Black decided to leave their band, the Starlight Wranglers, to team up with Elvis Presley full-time. Around the same time, DJ and promoter Bob Neal stepped in as the group's manager. The trio played regularly at the Eagle's Nest from August through October and returned to Sun Studio to record fresh tracks. On stage, Elvis quickly grew more confident. In November 1954, Elvis performed at the Louisiana Hayride. Although Elvis was nervous during his debut, his second set was more energetic and won over the audience. The show's organizers were impressed and signed him for a year of Saturday night performances. Around this time, Elvis upgraded his guitar. Determined to invest in his craft, he bought a Martin guitar for $175, a hefty sum back then, equivalent to about $1,800 today. On January 1, 1955, Elvis's new management contract with Bob Neal took effect. To mark the occasion, a cheerful photo of Elvis, Neal, and Sun Records' Sam Phillips circulated in magazines and fan publications. The trio expanded their reach, performing in cities like New Orleans, Houston, and Texarkana. Elvis also became a spokesperson for Louisiana Hayride's sponsor, Southern Made Donuts, joining other rising stars like Minnie Pearl, Johnny Horton, and Johnny Cash. Elvis, who had a lifelong love for donuts, was reportedly thrilled to receive a box of hot, freshly iced treats in exchange for recording a radio promo. Unfortunately, that commercial was never released. This growing regional fame caught the attention of Colonel Tom Parker, a promoter Bob Neal regarded as one of the best in the business. Parker invited Elvis to join Hank Snow's country music tour in February. By April 10, Elvis had released his fourth single, featuring Baby Let's Play House and I'm Left, You're Right, She's Gone. The record was a hit, marking a major milestone for the young artist. By May, Elvis was touring the South daily, and his relentless schedule prompted Colonel Parker to express interest in helping promote his career. At the end of May, Parker wrote to Bob Neal, signaling his desire to get involved. However, June brought an unexpected setback. On June 5, while traveling to Texarkana, Arkansas, Elvis's iconic pink and white Cadillac caught fire and burned to the ground near Fulton, Arkansas. The incident left him heartbroken. Elvis, sitting by the roadside, devastated, watching his dreams literally go up in smoke. Elvis Presley's journey to fame is filled with fascinating stories, and his iconic pink Cadillac is just one of them. After his original car was destroyed in a fire, Elvis replaced it with a 1955 Cadillac Fleetwood 60, painted in a custom shade of pink dubbed Elvis Rose by a neighbor who helped him with the repaint. The car, complete with a removable wooden roof rack for his band's instruments, was later gifted to his mother, Gladys, who proudly called it her car. Elvis had a deep affection for that Cadillac, which became one of the most famous cars in the world. In November of that year, Johnny Cash joined Elvis on tour and was surprised to see Elvis personally washing the car after it had been through rain and mud on the way to Texarkana. It was clear that Elvis cared deeply for his possessions, even as his fame grew. By August, Sun Records had released 10 records featuring Elvis Presley, Scotty, and Bill. A drummer joined the group toward the end of these sessions, adding more depth to their sound. Their music was a unique blend of styles. Songs like That's All Right had an R&B influence that one Memphis journalist described as the idiom of Negro field jazz, while tracks like Blue Moon of Kentucky leaned more toward country. Country DJs avoided it because Elvis looked too much like a black artist, while R&B stations dismissed it for sounding too hillbilly. Despite this, Elvis was gaining attention, earning nicknames like the King of Western Bop, the Hillbilly Cat, and the Memphis Flash. Fans, especially teenage girls, screamed, fainted, and chased him wherever he went. However, not everyone was a fan. Teenage boys often reacted with jealousy, and in some Texas towns, police escorts were needed to protect Elvis from potential troublemakers. By the summer of 1955, Elvis was on the radar of nearly every major and independent record label. He was named the most promising male artist of the year at the Country Disc Jockey Convention in November, and record companies began competing for his signature. While Colonel Parker was still finalizing a deal, Elvis hinted at his upcoming transition to RCA. Ultimately, Parker and Sam Phillips sold Elvis's contract to RCA Victor for an unprecedented $40,000, a deal that included all his previous recordings. Since Elvis was only 20 at the time, his father had to sign the contract on his behalf. Parker also negotiated with Gene and Julian Aberbach of Hill Range Publishing to create two companies, Elvis Presley Music and Gladys Music, which handled the rights to his recordings. Songwriters had to forfeit a portion of their royalties in exchange for the privilege of having Elvis perform their songs. By December, RCA began heavily promoting Elvis, re-releasing several of his earlier tracks and preparing for his national debut. Elvis had his first recording session with RCA in Nashville just 2 days after his Tunis birthday, on January 10, 1956. The session featured guitarist Chet Atkins and backing vocalists, including Gordon Stoker of the Jordanaires, alongside his usual bandmates and pianist Floyd Kramer. Among the songs recorded was Heartbreak Hotel, a haunting and unusual track that became an instant hit. Within 3 weeks of its release, it sold over 300,000 copies and eventually topped the Billboard Pop Singles chart for 8 weeks. It also reached #1 on the country chart and No. 5 on the R&B chart, becoming Elvis's first single to sell over 1 million copies and earning him his first gold record. As his popularity soared, Parker arranged for Elvis to appear on national television. In early 1956, Elvis made 6 appearances on CBS's stage show in New York over 2 months. While in the city, he recorded several songs at RCA Victor Studios, including the now classic Blue Suede Shoes. Meanwhile, I Forgot to Remember to Forget, a song released the previous year, climbed to the top of the Billboard National Country Singles chart in February, solidifying Elvis's place as a rising star. In early March, Neil's contract was terminated, paving the way for Parker to take over as Elvis Presley's manager. Shortly after, RCA Victor released Elvis's self-titled debut album on March 23. The album made history as the first rock and roll record to top the Billboard charts, holding the #1 spot for an impressive 10 weeks. Around the same time, Elvis made a big purchase, a $40,000 house at 1034 Audubon Drive in an upscale Memphis neighborhood. Using royalties from his hit Heartbreak Hotel, he bought the home for himself and his parents. Soon after, Elvis headed to Los Angeles to audition for Paramount Studios. During his audition, he hummed Blue Suede Shoes and acted out a scene from The Rainmaker, though the role wasn't a fit for him. He loved movies so much that he often rented out entire theaters to watch films in peace, sometimes staying all night. His dedication to film paid off when he signed a 7-year contract with Paramount Pictures during a trip to Las Vegas. In an interview, he was asked how much sleep he usually got. He admitted it was only about 4 or 5 hours a night. In April, Elvis and his band flew to Nashville, a trip that turned into a nerve-wracking experience. Their pilot got lost and had to make an unexpected stop in El Dorado, Arkansas to refuel. Things took a scarier turn when one of the plane's engines failed due to an incomplete fuel tank. Once they landed in Nashville, a shaken Elvis reportedly said he wasn't sure he'd ever fly again. The concerts kept rolling and drew massive crowds of up to 10,000 people. After one performance in La Crosse, Wisconsin, a local Catholic diocesan newspaper felt so alarmed that they fired off an urgent note to FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. They claimed Presley posed a serious threat to the nation's security, citing his on-stage moves as dangerously provocative, stirring up the passions of teenage audiences. The chaos following the show proved their unease wasn't entirely unfounded. More than 1,000 teenagers attempted to storm Elvis's dressing room at the auditorium. Addressing the backlash later that summer, Elvis defended himself, saying he didn't believe he was doing anything inappropriate. He argued that music, including rock and roll, couldn't possibly incite rebellion against authority or parents. The San Diego police chief publicly warned that if Elvis ever returned and performed in the same style, he'd face arrest for disorderly conduct. By mid-May, Colonel Parker transformed Elvis's shows into solo acts. That summer marked an important milestone when Elvis headlined solo at Detroit's iconic Fox Theater. Off-stage, however, rumors swirled about his personal life. Whispers of an engagement to June Juanico, a woman he'd met just a year earlier in Biloxi, set fans abuzz. Back in the day, Elvis Presley owned a one-of-a-kind, custom-made three-wheeled Messerschmitt, but in mid-August 1957, he traded the car for something unexpected: 2.5 hours of shopping at Lansky Brothers, a famous clothing store on Beale Street in Memphis. Around the same time, Elvis began working on his first movie, Love Me Tender, which was produced by 20th Century Fox. The movie premiered on November 16th at the Paramount Theater in New York and was later shown in theaters nationwide. Set in the American South during the Civil War, the melodrama became a box office success, and critics praised Elvis's performance, proving he could shine on the big screen too. However, not everything was smooth sailing for Elvis that August. He faced accusations of corrupting the morals of minors. Judge Marion Gooding even prepared an arrest warrant in Jacksonville, threatening to take action if Elvis performed his infamous hip-swiveling moves during a concert. After the show, Elvis explained to reporters that he couldn't understand what he was doing wrong. To tone things down, he replaced some of his more provocative moves with playful pinky wiggles. Despite the adjustments, the crowd still went wild. Elvis's debut on The Ed Sullivan Show was a monumental moment, drawing over 60 million viewers. During this period, Tupelo, his hometown, honored him by declaring an official Elvis Presley Day. Returning as a superstar, he performed 2 shows at the Mississippi-Alabama Fair and Dairy Show, the same event where he had sung as a 10-year-old boy. This time, though, 100 National Guardsmen and police officers stationed around the stage to keep the frenzied fans under control. 1956 was nothing short of a groundbreaking year for Elvis Presley. At the start of the year, he was just a rising regional star, but by December, he had skyrocketed to international fame. During those transformative months, Elvis recorded his first 2 albums with RCA, both of which sold millions of copies. He appeared on national television 11 times, signed a 7-year deal with Paramount Pictures, and made his acting debut in Love Me Tender, earning 4 gold records in the process. The Wall Street Journal even highlighted the explosion of Elvis-themed merchandise, reporting sales that reached an impressive $22 million in just a few months. In March 1957, Elvis purchased Graceland for $102,500, a sprawling estate where he would live for the next 2 decades. Originally a 500-acre farm dating back to the Civil War, the property had been transformed into a mansion in the late 1930s. Over time, Graceland became as iconic as Elvis himself. As a child, Elvis had vowed to his parents that he'd one day make enough money to buy them the best house in town. Graceland, with its stately colonial revival design, was the fulfillment of that promise. After Elvis's death, the property was valued at $350,000. In 1982, Priscilla Presley opened Graceland to the public, turning it into a tourist destination that continues to draw fans from around the world. Elvis's journey hit a major milestone with the release of his second album, which featured the heartfelt track Old Shep. This was a song he had first performed way back in 1945 during a talent show. As his fame skyrocketed, so did the chaos surrounding his concerts. Crowds often spun out of control, sometimes turning violent, with newspapers in Detroit warning that attending one of his shows could be downright dangerous. Not long after, Elvis released his third album, A Christmas Record. On December 20th, he received his draft notice. His enlistment was briefly delayed so he could finish filming King Creole, a movie Paramount and producer Hal Wallace had already poured $350,000 into. By March 24, 1958, Elvis officially joined the U.S. Army as a private. His arrival caused a media frenzy, with crowds swarming him as he stepped off the bus. Elvis made it clear he wanted no special treatment, stating that he was ready to serve like everyone else. Tragedy struck that summer when Elvis's mother, Gladys, was diagnosed with hepatitis. Just 2 days later, she passed away from heart failure at the age of 46. The loss shattered Elvis. He and his mother had always shared an exceptionally close bond. Reflecting on her death later, Elvis expressed his deep sorrow, wishing she could have witnessed the milestones in his life that followed. After completing his military training, Elvis Presley joined the 3rd Armored Division in Friedberg, Germany, on October 1st. It was there that a sergeant introduced him to amphetamines, which Elvis quickly embraced, believing they boosted his strength and helped with weight loss. Many of his army buddies followed suit. During his time in the service, Elvis also discovered karate. He took it seriously, training under Jürgen Seidel, and it became a passion he carried throughout his life, even weaving it into his live performances. Despite his superstar status, fellow soldiers noted that Elvis made an effort to blend in as just another soldier. He donated his army salary to charity, bought TVs for the base, and even purchased extra uniforms for his comrades. While stationed in Friedberg, Elvis met 14-year-old Priscilla Beaulieu. In her autobiography, Priscilla shared that Elvis had been anxious about the impact his 2 years of service might have on his career. Meanwhile, Elvis's record labels kept his music career alive by releasing previously recorded material, ensuring his popularity didn't wane. When Elvis returned to the U.S., on March 2, 1960, he was honorably discharged as a sergeant. His journey back home was met with adoring fans who lined the train route from New Jersey to Tennessee. Elvis made stops along the way to greet them, and during a brief interview, he offered advice to young men entering the military, encouraging them to play it straight and do your best. Not long after, RCA Victor awarded Elvis a plaque commemorating over 75 million records sold worldwide. However, his return to civilian life came with a grueling schedule. While he initially aimed for more serious acting roles, the lukewarm reception of Flaming Star and Wild in the Country led him back to safety. Of the 27 films he made during the 1960s, most were poorly received by critics. However, the relentless pace of filming, sometimes 3 movies a year, took a toll on the music's quality. Gordon Stoker of the Jordanaires recalled that Elvis was so disheartened by the material that he often walked away from the microphone, feeling it wasn't worth singing. The first stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame were unveiled on February 9, 1968, and among the honorees was none other than the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley. Just over a year earlier, in late December 1966, Elvis proposed to Priscilla Beaulieu. The couple tied the knot on May 1, 1967, in an intimate ceremony held in their suite at the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas. Around this time, however, Elvis's career was hitting a rough patch. The formulaic movies and cookie-cutter soundtracks he was churning out had lost their charm. On February 1, 1968, Elvis welcomed his only child, Lisa Marie, into the world. Her birth came during a turbulent time in his life, as he was increasingly frustrated with his stagnating career. Out of his last 8 singles, only 2 had cracked the top 40, and none had climbed higher than the 28th spot. In an effort to revive his image, Elvis's manager, Colonel Parker, arranged for him to appear on NBC for the first time in 8 years. The result was a special titled Elvis, which aired in December 1968. The show received glowing reviews and helped restore some of his credibility with the public. This resurgence also led to a series of live performances. During this period, Cassandra Peterson, a Las Vegas dancer, crossed paths with Elvis. She later recalled how strongly he opposed drug use, sharing that when she mentioned smoking marijuana, he was visibly shocked and told her never to do it again. Elvis wasn't just against recreational drugs, he also rarely drank. likely because he'd seen the devastating effects of alcoholism on several family members and wanted to avoid the same fate. In August 1970, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer documented Elvis's rehearsals and performances at the International Hotel for the film Elvis. That's the way it is. By then, his iconic jumpsuit had become a signature part of his live shows. Since the 1950s, there had been numerous threats against him. This time, however, the FBI ramped up security for his next two shows. Luckily, the concerts went off without a hitch. On December 21, 1970, Elvis met President Richard Nixon at the White House. During their conversation, he shared his deep patriotism and suggested he could use his influence to steer the hippie movement away from drugs, a cause both he and Nixon strongly opposed. As part of the meeting, Elvis requested a badge from the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs, which he saw as a symbol of his commitment to the fight. The following year, on January 16, 1971, the U.S. Junior Chamber of Commerce honored Elvis as one of the 10 most outstanding young men of the nation. Soon after, Memphis paid tribute by renaming a section of Highway 51 South, where Graceland is located, as Elvis Presley Boulevard. That same year, Elvis achieved a first in rock and roll history by receiving the Bing Crosby Award from the National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences. He also released 3 non-soundtrack albums, with Elvis Country earning the highest praise from critics for its cohesive focus on country music classics. In 1972, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer captured Elvis in the documentary Elvis on Tour, which later won the Golden Globe for Best Documentary Film. Behind the scenes, though, his personal life was unraveling. During this time, Elvis had an affair with Joyce Bova, which resulted in an unplanned pregnancy that ended in abortion. Elvis confided in Joyce about his troubled marriage and his belief that divorce was inevitable. That prediction came true on February 23, 1972, when Elvis and Priscilla finalized their divorce. Priscilla had admitted to an affair with Mike Stone, a karate instructor Elvis had introduced her to. Just months later, Elvis moved on with Linda Thompson, a songwriter and former beauty queen from Memphis who moved into Graceland with him in August of the same year. At a rare press conference, Elvis Presley was asked if he was satisfied with his public image. He explained that it was challenging to live up to the persona people expected. In January 1973, Presley performed 2 charitable concerts for the Kauai League Cancer Fund. These shows were part of the groundbreaking Aloha from Hawaii television special, which marked the first time a solo concert was broadcast globally. His stage attire for the event became iconic, an elaborate jumpsuit featuring an American eagle design. By the end of the show, when he dramatically spread his cape to reveal the eagle with its wings outstretched. Later that year, on October 9th, Presley's divorce was finalized. At one point, Presley even considered harming Stone and became suspicious that an attack during one of his concerts had been orchestrated by him. However, the incident turned out to be the result of overzealous fans storming the stage in a frenzy of admiration. By this time, Presley's health had taken a severe downturn. He overdosed on barbiturates twice in the same year, with the first incident leaving him in a coma for 3 days. By the end of 1973, his addiction to pethidine led to hospitalization in a semi-comatose state. One possible explanation for his declining health was a grueling schedule. In 1973 alone, he performed 168 shows, making it his busiest year yet. Despite his fragile health, he embarked on another demanding tour in 1974. During this era, Elvis Presley and Led Zeppelin were considered 2 of the most successful live performers. By September, Elvis Presley's health had taken a sharp turn for the worse. Tony Brown, his keyboardist, remembered a troubling moment when Elvis arrived at a concert at the University of Maryland. According to Brown, Elvis stumbled out of the limousine and dropped to his knees. When people rushed to help him, he refused their assistance, insisting he didn't need it. Guitarist John Wilkinson shared another grim memory, recalling how Elvis slumped over a chair backstage, barely able to move. Wilkinson often wondered why Elvis didn't just cancel the tour and take time off to recover. But Elvis would simply reassure him, saying everything would be fine and not to worry. RCA Records grew increasingly concerned as Elvis lost interest in recording music. He hadn't released a single since 1973. In an effort to reignite his passion, RCA sent a mobile recording studio to Graceland in 1976, allowing Elvis to record from the comfort of his home. Even then, the sessions were a struggle for him, and the singles that came out of them failed to make a significant impact. Despite the lack of chart success, Elvis's legendary status still loomed large across the nation. That same year, Elvis's personal life saw more upheaval. He and Linda Thompson ended their relationship in November, and soon after, he began dating Ginger Alden. Within 2 months, he proposed to her, presenting an engagement ring. However, some of his close friends later claimed that he wasn't genuinely serious about remarrying. Around this time, Elvis began canceling performances, as his health made it nearly impossible for him to sing or endure the demands of being on stage. His father, Vernon Presley, took a more active role in managing Elvis's finances and controversially fired 3 of his longtime bodyguards, known as the Memphis Mafia, citing budget concerns. The dismissed bodyguards later co-wrote a tell-all book titled Elvis: What Happened? The book deeply upset Elvis, and he even tried to buy out the publishers to prevent its release, but his efforts were unsuccessful. By then, Elvis was battling a range of serious health issues, including glaucoma, hypertension, liver damage, and an enlarged colon, many of which were worsened by his reliance on prescription drugs. On August 16, 1977, Elvis was scheduled to leave Memphis to kick off a new tour. The night before, he spent time relaxing with friends and then retired to his bedroom at Graceland. Tragically, the next day, Ginger Alden found him unconscious on the bathroom floor. He was rushed to the hospital, but doctors were unable to revive him. At 3:30 p.m., Elvis Presley was pronounced dead at Baptist Memorial Hospital. He was just 42 years old. On the day of Elvis Presley's funeral, thousands of devoted fans flocked to Graceland. They continued streaming toward the gates, hoping to catch a glimpse of his open casket. Held on Thursday, August 18th, the funeral drew immense crowds, but tragedy struck when a car crashed into a group of fans outside the gates, leading to the death of 2 young women and leaving another seriously injured. Roughly 80,000 mourners lined the streets as the procession made its way to Forest Hill Cemetery, where Elvis was laid to rest beside his mother. The gravesite quickly became a pilgrimage spot for fans, but when someone attempted to steal the singer's body, both his remains and his mother's were relocated to Graceland's meditation garden for security. Elvis's father shared in an interview that the loss of his son was so sudden it could take years for him to truly accept it. While grieving, he said the love and sympathy poured out by thousands of fans offered him great comfort. Fans, though heartbroken at never seeing Elvis perform again, would forever treasure the joy his music brought to their lives. Meanwhile, conspiracy theories lingered among some followers who speculated that Elvis faked his death, claiming that what lay in the coffin wasn't him, but a doll. President Jimmy Carter also reflected on Elvis's legacy, stating that both his music and magnetic personality reshaped American culture. By blending influences from white country and black rhythm and blues, Elvis left a permanent mark on the music scene. Even after his passing, the king of rock and roll continued to top the charts, with 6 posthumous country singles becoming top 10 hits between 1977 and 1981. Graceland, Elvis's iconic home, opened its doors to the public in 1982. Since then, it has become a cultural landmark, attracting over 500,000 visitors annually and ranking as the 2nd most visited house in the United States, second only to the White House. In 2006, it earned its place as a National Historic Landmark. Elvis Presley's been inducted into 5 prestigious music halls of fame: the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Country Music Hall of Fame, the Gospel Music Hall of Fame, the Rockabilly Hall of Fame, and the Memphis Music Hall of Fame. Over the years, he's also been recognized with notable awards, including the W.C. Handy Award from the Blues Foundation and the very first Golden Hat Award from the Academy of Country Music. In 1984, he was honored with the American Music Awards Award of Merit. By 1987, Forbes magazine listed him among the top 3 highest-earning deceased celebrities, a title he held consistently for 15 years from 2000 onward, at times pulling in an impressive $60 million annually. And let's not forget his unmatched record of 115 songs in the Billboard Top 40, a feat that cements his place in music history. In 2018, President Donald Trump posthumously awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom, a testament to his enduring influence. Not long after, the film, simply titled Elvis, premiered at the Cannes Film Festival on May 25, 2022, and hit theaters on June 24, 2022, courtesy of Warner Brothers. It chronicles Elvis's journey from his humble beginnings to his meteoric rise as a rock and roll icon, singer, and actor. The movie also dives into his complex relationship with his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, played by Tom Hanks. Austin Butler took on the role of Elvis, while Shaden Jay portrayed him as a child. Elvis managed to bring joy and inspiration to millions, becoming a cultural icon whose influence still lingers. Curious to learn more about other legendary figures? There's a treasure trove of biographies waiting to be explored. Thanks for sticking around until the end. If you enjoyed this, give it a like. See you later.